fried. Deep fat 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 fried.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Deep Fat Fucking Fried. Oh yeah. Yeah. All right. So it's Deep Fat Fried. How's everybody doing out there today? I'm sure
I
you're
got
all
a belly
doing
full of ramen. I'm a happy boy right now.
Oh yeah. I got bacon, eggs, toast, and all that bullshit. And also some chocolate milk just now. So yummy.
You know what I really want, TJ?
Dick.
Strawberry shake, man.
You want a strawberry shake?
Yeah, I want a strawberry shake.
Okay, we'll go get it. Oh, sorry, we don't serve.
No, I was referencing a really terrible movie.
Yeah. I'm sure everyone's seen our review by now of whatever it's called,
The Fanatic.
Yeah, The Fanatic with John Travolta. Oh, that was a classic. Pretty fresh for us. You guys probably saw it a couple weeks ago, but whatever. Still great. Still a great film. I give it 3 stars. So I recommend it to a certain type of person. I wouldn't recommend that movie to just anybody, but if you're looking for a almost surreal in its awfulness kind of movie, like if you just want to experience a weird out of body experience, check out The Fanatic. You could do worse.
You could do a lot better.
You could do better, but you could also do worse. And I know that, even just of my own volition, not even for like a review or something, I've done worse. Although I think most of the worst movies I've ever seen have been for this show. So
It's some of the best ones too. I mean, Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Hell Comes to Frogtown is a rare sort of gem.
The Sorceress.
Yes.
I mean, there's been some awful ones too. I mean, it's mainly a shit sandwich, but every once in a while, we get some really fucking good that, has been downtrodden and not rightfully so, in my opinion.
What is the worst movie we've ever watched here on this show?
It's hard to say because if you include the ones that we did kind of when this show was still nascent, we watched some of those like unwatchable shit that we ended up just talking through.
Yeah, I feel like the worst one for me, now that I'm really looking back, is probably when we watched Mazes and Monsters. Because not only was it bad, but we couldn't do anything with it.
No.
You know what I mean?
It's pretty bad, but I don't know, man. There was some fucking just really unmemorable 70s schlock that we delved into early on.
You know what was great was Enter the Fat Dragon.
Oh, yeah. Enter the Fat Dragon, yeah.
Another one I watched, one of the most recent movies I watched that was terrible was that In the Tall Grass on Netflix. It's like a Stephen King story. Have you guys ever seen that?
No.
Yeah, I don't watch that.
It's a Stephen King one, yeah.
Yeah, definitely among the worst of the Stephen King movies. You ever seen a movie?
Dude, I think you already know my least favorite one, TJ.
What is it? It's probably
What's the one movie series I've never wanted to watch that Paul's pushed endlessly. Well, he did for a while.
Steelmanville Road, dude.
Dude, Bad Ben. Oh man, like even the misty green sky. Like I'm like whatever. This is just so weird and off the wall. Like at least my brain is not used to this. Like,
why do you fear Steelmanville Road?
Because I know what lies at the end of Steelmanville Road.
Do you know?
Pain and suffering.
Yeah, maybe redemption is down there, Scotty. You don't know.
I'm gonna say that whenever this coronavirus shit gets diminished enough to the point where we can actually be in the same place again. I think the first thing we need to do to commemorate being back together in one place is to take the journey down Steelmanville Road.
Fuck you, TJ. Fuck you, dude. You're a goddamn monster, dude. You guys fucking planned this shit. You fucking planned it.
See, my mind is on the other end of this. I'm thinking that this is our new relationship now. We now have an arm's length distance relationship. We never see each other in person ever again.
Maybe. I mean, that may, who knows? Maybe this will maybe the virus will just get worse and worse, and then new viruses will spring up, and it'll just become too dangerous to ever make contact with another human being. But if the opposite happens and we're able to see each other again in the same place, then I say we commemorate it with Steelmanville Road for sure.
In 2023, COVID-23 runs rampant through humanity, killing 98% of the population. This podcast is one of the few that survives.
I'm kind of looking forward to when this crisis is boiled down to a terrible movie.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen. Every crisis has it happen at least 10 times. You know what I mean? Every major world crisis gets a bunch of horrible movies made about it. You know, there's going to be a COVID
9/11 movies. Dude, you know what, TJ? We've never actually done a 9/11 movie commentary review. That might be something we need to look into because there's some
wasn't there like a Nicolas Cage one?
Yes.
We got to do that. That's
it's
probably
wretched,
the one.
dude.
That's probably the one to do. Anyway, so last week, not last week, but last episode, we talked about The Simpsons, talked about its cultural impact and all that stuff. Talked about how it became one of the most influential TV shows of all time and how it lost its luster. Today, I'd like to explore a different aspect of the show. Like to look at the insane amount of classic and instantly recognizable characters that the show generated, especially, well, not even especially, but exclusively in its earlier seasons. So let's take a look at some of these characters. Let's start with the main cast. And, generally considered the protagonist of The Simpsons. The main character, is, in as much as there is a main character, is this portly fellow here.
Good old Homer.
Yeah. You know, when I read stuff about how, like Homer's weight is supposed to be around like 240 pounds, I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm way fatter than Homer. That's crazy.
Yeah, dude, I'm fatter than Homer Simpson. Fuck.
I know, right? So this is Homer J. Simpson. He's the main protagonist of the series. Like I said, in as much as it has one. He's the spouse of Marge Simpson. He's the father of Bart and Lisa Simpson and Maggie Simpson. His defining character traits is that he's overweight, but not as overweight as me and Paul. He is lazy, but not as lazy as me and Paul, because, he gets in some fucking adventures. And he's often ignorant of the world around him, which I envy him that. That'd be fun. Homer works as a low-level safety inspector at the Springfield nuclear power plant in Sector 7G. The fact that he's a safety inspector, by the way, is kind of hilarious. Although he is often incompetent and negligent towards his duty, he spends a great deal of his time at Moe's Tavern with his lifelong friends Barney, Carl, and Lenny, and the bartender Moe. All of those characters we'll talk about in a minute. When he's at home, you can often find him on the couch, mindlessly watching TV and snacking on, whatever food happens to be available, as well as drinking copious amounts of Duff beer. So basically, Homer Simpson is just, really, he's kind of the typical American male. I mean, he's fat, stupid, and drinks and just watches TV.
Yeah, he's the fucking prototypical late 80s, 90s American male.
I don't really feel like much has changed. Maybe replace TV with like some video games and stuff, but other than that,
yeah, change that to Xbox, and now he's drinking that 0 calorie flavored beer or whatever the fuck it's called, the sangrias or whatever.
So
there's a lot that's changed. I mean, the whole neighborhood bar thing is no longer a trope like it used to be.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
People don't go to the local. I mean, people still go to bars, but
they still do.
Not really.
They go to gastropubs and shit.
Yeah.
They go to fucking little hipster spots,
But Moe's Tavern is a fucking dive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a total dive bar.
And that's not as big a thing anymore. And the quote, I pulled a quote from Homer here. There's actually endless amounts of great Homer Simpson quotes, but this is my favorite. And it deals with his drinking issue. To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all life's problems. And
so he's a heavy drinker, kind of downplaying a horrible family destroying aspect of American life.
yes, the more you really kind of think about the character of Homer Simpson and how much he drinks, you kind of realize Homer has a serious alcoholism problem. I mean, there's no
Yes.
two way around. I mean, it kind of is taken less seriously because he's such a ridiculous character, but yeah, he's a drunk.
But it works for The Simpsons because it allows you to laugh at something that, if you're dealing with it, especially in your personal life, is no laughing matter. You know,
And
what I mean?
he's always kind of you always kind of have Barney to compare him to, because Barney is the character that's like the true drunk, I guess.
The non-functional alcoholic.
Right. So Homer is I guess, somewhat functional alcoholic.
But even Barney has a job, doesn't he?
Barney has been seen working various jobs at various times throughout the show's history. It's probably the closest that I've seen. Well, no, he got fired from that job. Well, he did the Mr. Plow thing for a while. He worked at a bowling alley for a little while, but I think he lost that job.
Well, he's an alcoholic.
So it kind of portrays him as working various odd jobs around town. So here's an interesting fact about Homer. He is the only character to have a speaking role in every single episode of The Simpsons. No other character can make that claim.
So there's never been a single episode of The Simpsons that Homer was not in.
Yeah, there's never been a single episode that wasn't in that he didn't have a speaking role in.
It's hard to argue he's not the main character then. I mean, if he's that's uniquely stands out.
Right.
I mean, like in the Simpsons ecosystem, I mean, there's so many fucking characters. It's insane. And for him, number one.
In the world of the 70s and 80s sitcom that this is, the Simpsons clearly is aping. He's the dad. He's the Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
He's the Dr. Cosby.
Yes.
So.
Paul.
Sorry, I forgot. You can't mention Cosby anymore.
He doesn't exist. That never happened. So here's his wife, Marjorie Jacqueline Marge Simpson, whose maiden name was Bouvier. She is a homemaker and full-time mom to the Simpsons kids. She and her husband Homer have 3 children, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. Marge is the moralistic force in the family and often provides a grounding voice in the midst of her family's antics by trying to maintain order in the Simpson household, usually pretty unsuccessfully. I did pull a quote for her as well. It was one of the lines that I remember really tickling me at the time.
Is the quote, homie?
That's a good one, too. Pretty good impression, by the way. Actually, I think you do it better than Julie Kavner at this point. She said, Fox turned into a hardcore sex channel so gradually I didn't even notice.
You know what? One of the moments in that horrible episode that you made us watch with Lady Gaga in it that I did find funny, was when Lady Gaga kissed Marge and it made her so horny she had to go fuck Homer. I was like,
that actually was kind of cool.
I was like, okay, that's fine.
You're right. I do remember that.
I remember growing up, dude. Like, I didn't like the character of Marge because it reminded me way too much of my own mom. I was like, no, I don't like that. That was like the nagging character, like from my point of view, was like, that's like my mom telling me what to do. So of course I was like, oh, I don't like that character. But I definitely grew up, as I grew up, more of an appreciation for the character.
Yeah, no one wants to see a mom character can be kind of hard to write in a way that's not annoying because moms, and why, like, you either when you're a kid you view Marge as like the mom, when you grow up you view Marge as the wife, and in both instances she's kind of like so it's like, okay. But when you really take a solid look at the family she's dealing with, you're kind of like, okay, I can really kind of see why she has to be like that.
She's the voice of reason.
So here's the thing, the trivia I pulled for her, including her hair. Marge is 8'6".
Wow.
She's 8'6".
Yeah,
Fucking Amazon, dude.
when you include her hair, obviously, aside from that, she's not particularly tall. The next character, and by the way, I would say the former main character of The Simpsons, because if you actually look at the first 3 seasons, they're much more focused on Bart than later seasons were. And Bart was really the breakout, the initial breakout popular character on the show. I think Homer has kind of usurped him, in the intervening years. But
He was definitely the most quotable character.
I don't have a cow, man.
And
Eat my shorts.
it's kind of interesting that one thing that you notice about all the Simpsons characters is pretty much all of them have, like, all the major characters have some sort of catchphrase associated with them, usually multiple. With Bart, it's "I caramba, don't have a cow, man, eat my shorts."
Eat my shorts, which was lifted from the Breakfast Club, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
John Bender says it in the Breakfast Club.
So Bart is he's your typical fucking. He's just like an update on like the Dennis the Menace trope, kind of like he's mischievous, he's rebellious, misunderstood, disruptive, dangerous. He's obviously not like the kind of dangerous he's gonna like whip out a switchblade and stab you in the fucking eyeball or something. But
Well, kind of acting out because he's kind of like the underachiever of his family, kind of much like his dad.
He represents true moral flexibility in the show. Like, he's not a dude that's going to go out and kill somebody, but he's pretty much willing to subvert any social norm for personal gain.
That's true.
Bart is a dude that if you look at him for what he is, he might be dangerous as an adult. You know what I mean?
Potentially. So a little bit of trivia on Bart. In the Tracy Ullman shorts, the number of Bart's spikes on his hair kept changing. When the actual show began, they had to settle, and they decided on 9. So that Bart has 9 spikes atop his head.
Yeah, he had way fewer, didn't he, in the early ones? Like 3?
Sometimes more.
Really?
Yeah, like a lot of times you look at it, it's just like a series of like super jagged, kind of up and down lines. Lisa, the eldest daughter and the middle child of the Simpsons family. Lisa was named after a train called Little Lisa on her parents' first anniversary. She is a charismatic 8-year-old girl who exceeds the standard achievement of the intelligence level of children her age. Not to everyone's surprise, she is the moral center of her family. In her upbringing, Lisa lacks parental involvement of Homer and Marge, which leads to hobbies such as playing saxophone or guitar, riding and caring for horses, and interest in advanced studies. In school, Lisa's popularity is affected by those who view her as a geeky overachiever, which leaves her with a few friends. She focuses on her goals and strives to reach her potential, and at the age of 8, she is already a member of Mensa with an IQ of 159.
Dude, she's like she's like the fucking Simpsons Wesley, dude. Just like every time there's like some like hey, super genius thing, they're gonna put Lisa in that role. I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, when she's talented in so many facets that it's kind of just the character that if they really need a character that can, Homer's versatile in a different way. Like he's like the slapstick guy that can do like a crazy project. But if they have the super smart character, that's what the role she obviously fills in the show generally.
She's the bright mirror of Bart Simpson.
Yeah.
Where he is an underachiever, she's an overachiever. Where he is morally flexible, she's morally rigid to her detriment. Where Bart is looking to take advantage of people, she has a genuine desire to help people.
They even have a great episode where it's like they do the parent-teacher conference, and Homer, of course, is like, "Can I please have Lisa?" And Marge, of course, has to go to Bart's conference, and of course that doesn't play out very well. Also, she has the dilemma about being a vegetarian, because obviously a bunch of people are against her. Like, oh, you shouldn't be a vegetarian. Which at that time was a much bigger issue.
And it was basically, I think it was Paul McCartney who said that he would come on the show and on that vegetarian, because he's a vegetarian. He would only do the episode if the writers promised to, consistently keep her a vegetarian and not, let it be one of these things that's reset, when the next episode starts, basically.
And to my knowledge, they did.
Yeah, they haven't. They've never gone back on it or anything. Like now, Lisa eats fucking hamburgers or whatever the fuck. So I was pulling kind of little mini bios for these characters and some facts, but when I started to get into the peripheral characters, I was like, there is way too many of these to even do that. So let's just kind of get into some of these other characters. I didn't bother to pull Maggie. We could talk about Maggie if you want, though, because she is technically a member of the Simpsons cast, and she has somewhat of a personality. But it's not
kind of the hardest character to imbue with a personality, and
right,
they managed to do it, which says a lot.
I mean, she's a baby, so.
But but they give Maggie her moments. Maggie will be pissed off or something. She'll point her pacifier at them, like, "Hey." So she sometimes is actually a moral character, a moral agent in the story. Like if they're doing something bad, Maggie can react to that in a way. I mean, she mainly just likes to do like a little kid or a little baby does. She just crawls around and kind of does her own little thing. But she does have moments like that,
Oh yeah. I'm just, there's not really a lot. I don't have any I don't have any Maggie quotes or anything, because she doesn't have any. She just sucks on her pacifier.
Yeah. So there's a Maggie quote for you.
Oh, interesting thing about Lisa, by the way, the trivia I pulled for her was that she is the only Simpson member of the Simpson family who does not incorporate the color blue into her design.
Oh,
because if you notice, if you notice here, Homer's pants are blue, Marge's hair is blue, Bart's shorts and shoes are blue, Maggie's pretty much entire outfit is blue. And Lisa has no blue in her design whatsoever. So,
never noticed that. That's interesting.
That was a conscious choice on the part of the designers to kind of set her apart from the rest of the family. And she is probably the least Simpson of the Simpsons.
Yeah, she does seem like an alien in the family for sure.
So this is another member of the Simpson family. This is Abraham Simpson, Grandpa Simpson. Who is, he's basically just his main character trait is that he's old. I mean, there's really not much else.
Crotchety old man.
Yeah, I mean, like probably my favorite line from him was when he started getting, basically Bart and Lisa wrote an episode of Itchy and Scratchy to try to get it made, and it wasn't taken seriously, so they decided to put an adult's name on it. And they chose to use Abraham here. And so the script was accepted, and, they started sending Abraham checks. And, Bart and Lisa are like, didn't you get suspicious when you started getting money for free? And he's like, no, I just figured it was because the Democrats are back in power. He's characterized by, long, meandering sort of, speeches about the old times and telling meaningless stories and
having flashbacks and passing out on the couch. Like he's supposed to be watching the kids. Like Grandpa's gonna watch you, and of course Grandpa's head hits the back of the couch, and the kids do whatever they want.
He's like a good representation, I think, of real old men. A lot of it is doddering, meandering nonsense, but there's some brief moments of blunt wisdom that come with it. You know what I mean?
Yep. Like moments of lucidity. Basically. I keep seeing Joe Biden when I'm looking at him right now. We're talking about this.
Man, don't put down Abraham.
I know
with that comparison.
It is mean.
Yeah, that's wrong.
As far as I know, Abraham never pushed a woman against a wall and fingered her against her will. So Then again, I don't know for sure that Joe Biden did that either.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Let's talk about a very different sort of old man that lives in Springfield.
Excellent.
This is Mr. Burns, who, by the way, if you look at a lot of fan polls, is probably the most popular non-Simpsons character. Like the most popular character on The Simpsons that isn't a Simpson.
See my vest? Dude, I fucking love Mr. Burns.
I knew you would. Now,
yeah.
I took a few Simpsons personality tests to like which Simpsons character are you? And they mostly seem to agree that I am comic book guy, but I'm kind of curious if Scotty would end up as Mr. Burns because,
I mean, it's totally possible.
He even has kind of a Scotty-esque look about him. You know what I mean? Like if you kind of take the old away and just kind of imagine him sort of younger, you can kind of see Scotty in there.
I'm fine with that comparison. I'm totally fine with it, dude. I just always loved that Mr. Burns was an asshole and just gets away with it. He always gets away with it. I mean, he has a few episodes where he gets his comeuppance, but it's always, of course, reversed because it's a fucking, oh, okay, well, you got your money back or whatever.
He's also got a heart.
Yep.
Like there's a heart buried in there. He just doesn't. Nobody has access to it. You know what I mean? Very briefly, it might pop out here and there. But he manages to sidestep the "I'm just the predictably evil all the time" villain trope pretty well. I think
he's only evil like 95% of the time.
Right,
5% of the time you might see a little glimmer of fucking good inside Mr. Burns.
But he's like the consummate businessman in that. It's like sometimes like it makes sense to actually be the nice guy, and he does it. It's not always, and most times it's not. It's just pragmatic, ruthless businessman. Like but it's also kind of implied too that he Mr. Burns is kind of old money. He's in his position because he's in his position. It's not like he could actually attain that if he was to start from square one.
Right.
It's very true to kind of like American society and culture. Like he's venerated, but it's also because of just the fact of his, he was born into wealth. He was born into it.
So this is Waylon Smithers, who is the toady of Mr. Burns, and also has a secret, I guess, attraction to Mr. Burns. Like is basically in love with Mr. Burns, despite the fact that Mr. Burns is a horribly gaunt skeletal demon of a human being. And I guess as kind of like the seasons have gone along, I guess that it's become more of like an open secret, whereas in the earlier episodes it's kind of more like just a secret. But there's some great fucking classic moments of Smithers fantasizing about Mr. Burns. The one that I think everyone remembers is his fantasy about Mr. Burns popping out of a birthday cake, and he's naked except for like a happy birthday sash across his body, and he's happy birthday, Mr. Smithers. It's like. And closeted gay assistant to Mr. Burns, kind of has like a somewhat uptight personality, but he's definitely got more of a heart than Mr. Burns does. But I guess he couldn't have too big of a heart because he does assist the old man in his schemes. But maybe just because he's so passive and
kind of loyalty, I would argue.
Yeah, can't really. Yeah, and as well as having an attraction towards him, he's also kind of like Mr. Burns is kind of like his surrogate father, because he kind of took him in when his own father died. I think it was revealed in an episode at some point. This is Ned Flanders, who's kind of the God-bothering pushover neighbor of Homer Simpson,
the Christian of the crew.
Yeah, I mean, and he's like super hardcore religious, but also kind of passive to a fault, to the point where Homer can basically get away with murder.
Yeah. Well, Homer, you borrowed my weed whacker. Kind of like that's like a running joke in The Simpsons, reoccurring things. Like Homer borrows something from Flanders, never gets it back, never gives it to him.
One of the great things was when Homer was moving out of town and they couldn't sell their house, so Homer just slapped a fucking sign that says "abandoned" on the front of their house and packs all their shit. And Flanders shows up and he's like, "So, are you gonna be needing all those things you borrowed from me?" And Homer was just like, "Yeah." And Ned's like kind of like
still using those.
And Ned's kind of like, "Well, and he doesn't know what to say. He gets kind of speechless, and Homer just kind of looks at him. He's like, "Oakley dokley." And then Flanders is like, "Oakley dokley," and walks away. And it's like
one of my favorite memes is like Homer going over to, like, he crosses the bushes over to Flanders' property, sees what he's doing, he acknowledges Homer, and Homer just like sinks back in.
Oh yeah.
Another thing too is like they're constantly he's constantly trying to avoid Ned, not because he doesn't want to return the shit, just because he doesn't want to interact with him. It's like, oh, it's my Christian neighbor. It's like my neighbor I don't like. So it's like a relatable thing. Because almost anyone's had a neighbor they didn't want to be around. Or
there's a depth to Ned Flanders' character too.
Oh yeah,
because he's definitely got two personalities. He's got the public face that he likes to show his neighbors, which we just delved into. You know, we've got a guy that's basically stolen half of your yard equipment. And the best you can do is, hey, man, you still using that weed whacker? You know what I mean? There's that overly sappy, nice public face. And then his private face that we get glimpses of is insanely judgmental. Like insanely judgmental of other people. He likes to put on the face that he sees the best in people, but I think really a lot of times we see that it's the opposite with him.
Right.
He sees the worst.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, part of the whole Christian sort of thing is that you know, you are. I mean, it kind of invites you to stand in judgment of people, especially people who are, you know, less righteous than you are. And you know, I think that's part of the reason why Homer avoids Flanders, because maybe on some level he kind of picks up on that sort of thing. And you know,
well, it's off-putting in general. I mean,
right? No one wants to, you know, no one really wants to spend too much time with a God botherer unless they're also into that.
They're nowhere near as good actors as they think they are. You know what I mean? The pretense is obvious to everybody, you know, especially if you're not in that community. I've spent a lot of my life dealing with these types of super evangelical Christians. And the most off-putting thing about them is not their niceness. That's actually nice. I'm going to be honest with you. Like having somebody that's uber polite and uber hospitable, like that's good. It's that you know it's fake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know that at the center of that is this really harsh judgment. And it's really like, they're not being nice to be nice. They're being nice to present as nice, which is different. You know what I mean? Because they want to be an example to you. They want you to look at them and go like, man, I'm going to be like that Christian guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's a I don't know, there's a condescension to that I think is really easy to pick up on.
Yeah, it is a bit patronizing. And one of the more dramatic episodes of The Simpsons, when Flanders does finally have like a breakdown and he just starts letting loose, that filter is, you know, eroded away where it's like, I can't handle this anymore. I'm going to tell everyone what I think about them.
Yeah, and it's like, and you see just like how much anger and hostility he's really holding on to. You know, he just
way more than most of the other characters who
yeah.
don't live rigid, you know what I mean?
Right. He basically goes in
his lifestyle, which is supposed to be this shining example of how we're all supposed to live, is at the root of all of his internal idiosyncrasy. You know what I mean? It's just, you know, I'm this guy that tries to radiate love, but deep down in the darkest part of my heart, there's just a lot of hate. I'm hateful towards all of you.
Now here's someone who wears his hate on his sleeve and doesn't have any sort of pretense otherwise. This is Mo Sislak, the bartender at Moe's Tavern, owner proprietor of Moe's Tavern, who I love this character because he's just so nakedly hateful, and he's a loser and has no sort of denial of that fact. He's a loser who knows he's a loser. He knows that he occupies a lowly station in life. You know, he has
in every sense, really.
Yes. He's unsuccessful in love. He's pretty unsuccessful in business, despite the fact that he is able to, I guess, keep his bar open, probably mostly on the strength of Homer and Barney. You know, he's just, you know, relentlessly unhappy. It's alluded to that he's attempted suicide multiple times. We know that he has some involvement in, you know, various criminal dealings to kind of, you know, make a little extra money on the side. You know, his solution to the problems that life presents usually involves some sort of, you know, nefarious, you know, deceptive scheme or scam. But, you know, even those are, you know, he's obviously not very successful at that either.
There's a lot of mirrors in The Simpsons.
Yes.
And I've always, and maybe this is just due to the fact that I spent so much of my life working in it, but I was a long-time customer service representative for a number of companies.
Yeah.
Front-facing customer dealing stuff. And Mo, for me, has always been like a cathartic character because he gets to have the open contempt for the customer that we all have.
Right.
And he's miserable, you know, even though he's running this ostensibly happy business where people are supposed to come and have a good time. It's a source of misery in his life. It just makes him even more and more miserable. And I think he's mirrored by, I'm sure, another character that we're going to talk about. when it comes to customer service.
Well, you know, Mo being at the tavern, that's his life. Like these other guys are coming, I'm gonna come fucking get drunk after work and let loose. And Mo's just kind of there, like cleaning the glass, like, yeah, look at these assholes enjoying their fucking lives while I'm in this shitty, dingy bar, fucking serving them shit. Fuck them.
That's honestly, that's a common sentiment in customer service.
Right.
Oh yeah.
It's
Sure.
like I'm in Starbucks, this place. It's got this happy jazz music playing, and everything's perfectly clean and decorated and shit. But inside, I feel like Mo. You know, I'm miserable. It's a source of misery to me. Like where other people come bounding in there because they're happy they're going to get their fucking caramel macchiato or whatever it is. To me, them ordering that is annoying because it's so fucking pretentious and it's what everybody gets. Oh, let me guess, you want extra caramel on that? Okay. Oh, how did I know? How did I know you wanted extra caramel drizzle? I must be a fucking psychic. You total fucking individual, you.
So it's a bit of envy, you would say, that, you know, you can have that ability to just, because Mo just tells you what he thinks. He doesn't have to have this pretense, which, you know, is something that's very rare.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you could give Mo, I think, aside from he does have a little bit of a soft side that you see here and there, but the one thing you can definitely give Mo above a lot of the other characters, especially someone like Ned Flanders, who we just looked at, is that, you know, there's no... He's definitely a what you see is what you get kind of guy. He's not holding back. He's pretty much letting you know how he feels in the moment. So there's like sort of an honesty to Mo that you know, he's not trying to deceive you. He's not trying to act happy. In fact, the idea that Mo could maintain that sort of facade was he tried to turn his bar into a family eatery with all kinds of wacky stuff on the walls, like Uncle Mo's family feed bag or some shit. And, you know, he walked around with a big smile on his face. And it lasted about a night before he fucking snapped and screamed at a fucking little kid who was just like, Unky Mo, can I... Shut up! You know, he's just like outraged. And he just says, get all this fucking family-friendly shit out of here. You know, I want to be a dive bar again.
He's the fucking pessimist. He's the glass half empty, you know? So,
he's one of a number of pessimists on this show. Honestly.
Oh, yeah.
But I would say probably one of the more prominent ones.
For sure.
I also love the scene where Mo is taking a lie detector test. And, you know, I won't give away the whole bit, but it's pretty funny. This is Sideshow Bob. He's not a super regular character, but like a recurring guest character, I guess. Voiced by Kelsey Grammer of Cheers and Frasier fame. This is one of the more intelligent characters on The Simpsons, but this is definitely more of like a nefarious sort of evil intelligence. You know, he started off on the show as Krusty the Clown's sidekick, and tried to frame Krusty for robbery so that he could take over the show. And that worked for a while until Bart and Lisa, you know, I think mostly Bart, discovered that, you know, what the truth about what had happened. And ever since then, his modus operandi has pretty much been to kill Bart Simpson. Now, his motive maybe undergoes, you know, like slight changes here and there. Sometimes they portray him as reformed, and I think they had a reconciliation between him and Krusty at one point. But for the most part, that's what he's about. And you know, probably one of the episodes with him where he is really like going after Bart hardcore is like the episode with the rake gag and stuff, and you know, all of these like physical things keep happening to Bob. It's kind of weird because he's even though he's like a kind of an evil genius character, he's like the victim of a lot of slapstick gags and stuff. And I think like the inherent sense of like his own like dignity kind of makes that funnier.
I always love the and I didn't realize until years later after I saw the movie, like they basically do a Cape Fear episode with Sideshow Bob trying to murder Bart.
And that was the one that I think is like probably the finest moment of the character.
Also, the Simpsons ride, the main ride of Universal, is actually Sideshow Bob trying to kill the Simpsons and Bart yet again.
He's probably the closest thing the Simpsons has to a villain. So, I mean, Mr. Burns, I guess, can sometimes serve as a villain, but you know, Mr. Burns is not usually trying to murder you.
No.
Sideshow Bob is actually trying to kill you. So he definitely poses the gravest sort of existential threat to the Simpsons family at any given time.
Well, Mr. Burns is the plutocrat. You know, he just wants to exploit you.
He's a pretty, you know, accurate representation of a sociopath. You know, there would be, I think, an impulse maybe in some people to make a crazy murderous character like this with really no moral code to speak of be just a gibbering crazy person. But he takes himself very seriously. He sees himself as an incredibly normal person. So there's that kind of seriousness about him.
And in fact, a kind of superior person too.
The end justify the means. You know, I'm not doing this 'cause I'm evil. I'm doing this so I can get whatever I want to get. You know, if it's political office or if it's, you know, the murder of Bart Simpson, whatever I'm doing is justified to me.
Right.
Right. He wants to make money, or he wants to get revenge, or he wants to attain power, as he did in the episode where he runs for mayor, or, you know, he wants to, get the entertainer status that he feels like he deserves by stealing the spotlight from Krusty. You know, so I think Paul's right. He is a pretty accurate depiction of a sociopathic personality, someone who's willing to do anything that it takes to achieve their objectives. You know, only in real life he probably would be a huge success.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'd be a Fortune 500 CEO.
Here's a character that that is a huge success. Although it's kind of unclear why, because he's kind of Krusty seems to be portrayed sometimes as like a has-been, but yet he's a has-been who's got a lot of money, and basically he, you know, a lot of the jokes around Krusty kind of sort of center on his status as a complete sellout. You know,
He's the ultimate sellout, dude.
everything. I mean, like he's a performer with like zero artistic integrity of any kind. He's willing to He's willing to put his name on any shoddy piece of merchandise that he thinks he can make a buck off of. You know,
A great example of that is the Krusty Land episode.
right. Or, you know, even the fact that like one of the main fast food chains in Springfield, in fact, I think it's the only fast food chain you really see depicted regularly, is Krusty Burger, you know, where he has he runs his own series, you know, chain of burger shops, and you know they've done the joke more than once where, you know, he's shooting a commercial and he takes a bite of the burger, he's like and then as soon as the cameras are off, he's spitting out like bleh, you know, just like disgusting. You know, you see several times, you know, it depicts him as a joke thief. I mean, he's basically like a hack entertainer who's a total fucking sellout and shill.
Another very two-faced character, too.
Right.
He's got his public persona and his private persona that has really nothing but contempt for his audience.
Right. Contempt for his audience. And, I mean, he's also depicted as having a, like, massive pornography collection, a serious gambling problem, you know, drug problems, you know, just like every kind.
He's your typical big time entertainer. You know, it's like he's somebody that instead of going down that, oh, you know what, I'm gonna be this pure, you know, be kind of this purist. You know, like I'm here for the art. I'm here to entertain people. It's like he's here to make a buck. And if he's got to go, hey, you know, and do all that shit, he's willing to do it. But the minute that camera's off of him and he's not making money, his real personality comes out, and it's far different than what's portrayed to his audience.
Oh yeah, and you know, I love Krusty. I think he's awesome. So interesting. I do know a little bit of piece of trivia about Krusty is you might notice that his design is pretty similar to that of Homer Simpson. That was initially supposed to be kind of a joke on the part of the writing staff, you know, that it was the joke was, you know, Bart doesn't really respect or look up to his father, but he looks up to this clown that looks almost identical to his father, and they didn't really run with that gag ultimately, but you can still kind of see a lot of similarity in the character designs between Homer and Krusty.
Change the clothes, take the fucking red nose off and the hair, and you pretty much have Homer.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the same body type, same basic build and look and everything. Even kind of a similar outfit. I mean, honestly, he's even got a collared shirt like Homer. Pretty popular character, groundskeeper Willie, the Scottish groundskeeper. Not a lot of characters have their fucking profession right there in their name, but the Scottish groundskeeper of the elementary school. Another character that definitely fits firmly into the category of loser. Although he looks a bit pudgy here, there's actually a extremely well muscled body under that those overalls.
He's ripped under there.
Yeah, and he's kind of depicted as just a really angry Scottish stereotype. But yet he seems like to have a really like pretty big fan following and popularity, despite I don't really know that there's much there beyond just I'm an angry Scotsman who lives in a fucking shack. But I
mean, I don't know. I'm kind of on a roll here, and I may be seeing this appear over and over more than I think it is. But I think he's kind of two-faced too. He's at least as I remember him being portrayed, he's outwardly antisocial.
Right.
He doesn't want people being around him, but he's also an incredibly good storyteller, which is an inherently group activity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he wants to be social, but outwardly he isn't.
By his nature, he's not. Like, he has the desire. And I mean, like, a lot of characters is the opposite. Like, they're nice to people to their face, but inside they hate them. Like, just about Krusty, he's like the opposite. It's like he actually seems to like people and care, and have an appreciation and caring, because a lot of times when people are down and out in episodes, like, he'll be fighting something or doing something to help people, but a lot of times he's very gruff and just brusque and is like, oh, whatever, I don't give
And he doesn't seek recognition for it. He's not the kind of guy that saves the day and then expects to bask in, you know what I mean? He doesn't want the social aspect of it. But, at the core of him, he wants to help people. He wants to be helpful to the kids at the school. He wants to be helpful to the town in general.
Yeah, I mean, there's been several instances where he's saved people or fought off. He fought off a wolf at one point. There was an episode where he had a very attractive girlfriend in his little shed with him, and I forget what exactly she said, but it was something along the lines of like, "Why don't you come back in here?" And basically, she's offering to have sex with him or something along those lines, and he's like doing some kind of menial task out on the grounds, and he's like, "Don't try to compete with my work, woman. You won't win." It's like he takes his job very seriously, even though most people would not really kind of view what he does as an important function of society. So I guess kind of like there's a little bit of that, like he actually has a work ethic, which I guess not a lot of Simpsons characters really have.
As it is with a lot of the characters that have a defining characteristic, it's to his detriment. Like, he's got a work ethic that, utterly prevents him from having anything like except for in rare instances.
Right. But it's kind of like his work ethic has kind of prevented him from doing anything exceptional because, but then again, maybe he's happy just doing that. It seems like, I don't know that he faces much of an internal conflict about it. Like, unlike Moe, who's kind of like, I'm a fucking loser. This fucking sucks. You don't really see Willie sitting around feeling sorry for himself too often. He's just like, I'm
going to live it. This is it. Like, he's more pragmatic. It's like, this is reality. This is what I do. I'm happy doing it. I don't give a shit if my station changes or whatever. I don't care. I'm doing it.
He's more likely to have contempt for the person that's wallowing in self-pity than be the person that does it.
Exactly so. So I guess there is a little bit to the character. Kind of got the really working class kind of mentality there. Oh, what happened there?
He's got the mentality.
Where the fuck did Ralph go? I was trying to go to Ralph, but he kind of vanished when I clicked him for some reason.
I've met people like this, where it's like groundskeeper, where it's just like their work is their life, and that's all they want to do, and that's where they're happiest, and they don't want to be at home doing bullshit. Even if they have families, it's like, nope, this is my job. That's what I'm going to do. And so, I mean, is reflective of a lot of people in society.
Sure. Absolutely.
So the next character we're going to talk about does not have two facets to his personality.
No.
There is one facet. Probably the only character on The Simpsons that makes Homer look like a fucking genius in comparison. This is Ralph Wiggum, whose probably defining characteristics are naivete beyond belief, total lack of comprehension as to what's going on around him at any given time.
In fact, oftentimes the opposite, a complete misunderstanding of events.
Right.
Like he doesn't just, like not take part in those. He doesn't experience them because he sees it in a completely erroneous way.
There you see there was an episode where Principal Skinner hooked up with Edna, and when he went back to, the whole school caught them in the closet making out. And when Ralph goes home to tell his parents, he tells them that they were in the closet making babies, and he saw one of the babies, and the baby looked at him. And, so it's just like, like he's off in his own fucking world, and it's a pretty dimly lit little world that he lives in.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know it.
No.
That's the thing, is like he's probably one of the happier characters on the show. And he's definitely like a nerd or the weird kid at school, but he's not aware of it. He's just kind of himself, which is an admirable trait.
Right.
You know what I mean?
He's too stupid to have any guile, so there's not any sort of two-facedness to him.
No. I'm actually going to play you my favorite Ralph Wiggum thing.
Go ahead.
You fail English? That's impossible.
I love it.
I mean, he has so many quotable moments in the show.
I remember there was a great line.
A dumb little kid character, you wouldn't expect it. And that's why there's something about The Simpsons that we're talking about the good elements of it. It's like some of these characters, even though they're so tertiary or so fleshed out, I mean, like you understand what Ralph is about. He doesn't have a mean bone in his body. He's just kind of this really, truly innocent player in this show. And that's so rare because, like we talked about, all these other characters, and like we can talk to their motivations. Like, Ralph is kind of just like, I don't know.
He has no motivations. He has no machinations. He's pretty much just going along.
He goes with the flow.
Probably one of my favorite lines from his was in the, I think it was in the Simpsons movie, actually, where Bart was dared to skateboard naked all the way from his house to Krusty Burger, and he does. And when he goes past Ralph naked on his skateboard, Ralph, of course, watches him go by, and then looks directly at the camera and just like, I like men now. It's just like, yeah.
I love him.
They give Ralph some of the best one-liners in the show.
Because certain one-liners you have to have, like, they're not, he's not trying to be clever, but there's like, you can use his naivete to your advantage. Because he can just say things in a blunt way without even recognizing that he's being blunt, just because, he's basically empty-headed.
If it came out of any other character's mouth, it would be horribly mean. Right. He's able to just say it because he's completely oblivious to any kind of social norm.
He's like, he kind of reminds me of Dinor.
Yeah.
He's
definitely Dinor. If Dinor could take a Simpsons quiz, he would definitely be the Ralph Wiggum for sure.
Speaking of the Wiggums, here's Ralph's slightly not as stupid father, Chief Wiggum, although, not much brighter either. Probably stupider than Homer. I don't know.
Yes.
Definitely Chief Wiggum is definitely pretty fucking low on the intelligence scale as far as I do like how when we go through these Simpsons characters, not only are there a wide variety of personality types, but there's a lot of variance in character intelligence,
Sure.
With you have characters that are very, very bright and Machiavellian, and and then you have characters like Chief Wiggum here who couldn't possibly be any dumber.
And of course, he's in a position of ultimate power too.
Right, and that's kind of the big joke behind his character is like, he's dumber than Homer Simpson, but he has way more power than Homer Simpson.
We like to have this pretense in this country that the authorities know what they're doing. And he's there to subvert that idea. He's like, the authorities they have no fucking clue what they're doing.
He actually has to play the cop. It's like he's dropping his gun. He doesn't know where the fuck he's at. He's doing the wrong thing. He's easily fooled by clearly criminal activity.
If he ever does anything right, it's completely by accident.
Yes.
And people assume that, it was because he's a good cop.
Aside, I don't really know what sort of, I guess this is another kind of instance where, other than, the inherent sort of two-facedness of like trying to portray himself as a competent authority figure. I don't think anyone really buys that he is. So there's really like maybe an unsuccessful attempt at like a double face, but at the same time, no one's convinced by it. So he's pretty much just a fucking incompetent doofus.
I'll tell you what, though, one of my favorite episodes is when Chief Wiggum and Homer face off in the chili cook-off, dude. That is like because like, they're both both dumber characters, and then just seeing them clash in the battle over food is just like it's the perfect venue for them to have that little kind of like social battle.
I love when he was in pursuit of a vehicle at night, and then the vehicle turns its headlights off, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's a ghost car!" You know?
Yeah. I mean, despite his flaws too, though, you have to admit he's a good dad to Ralph Wiggum.
That is true.
He's a very accepting and apologetic father to his son, who is clearly a fucking beyond social misfit, but he doesn't see that in him. You know what I mean? That's kind of sweet.
Yeah, he does see the best in him. Like they have that competition where they build the nuclear power plant, they do the designs, and Ralph does his retarded design. He's like, "Get off the stage, Ralphie." So he is a good dad. I don't.
Yeah, definitely. That's true. He is a good father to his son, as best as he can be. Obviously, he's not the super competent. I love the all. What is your fascination with my forbidden closet of mystery thing? But yeah, this is Nelson.
Yep,
Nelson,
the bully.
Nelson Muntz, the stereotypical bully of the Springfield Elementary schoolyard. Some people say the illegitimate son of Barney Gumble. It's kind of a fan theory.
I could see it.
Yeah, that's a strong theory there.
But I guess he does actually have a father canonically that looks even more similar to him. But you got to admit, he does have a very similar design to Barney.
Well, that's because he's likely going to be Barney. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like that's probably the path that he's going to take in life. So this character is obviously he's the bully of the schoolyard. He's prone to beat people up. His catchphrase is kind of just whenever someone suffers misfortune, he points at them and laughs.
But all found in a deep insecurity. When the character is explored more, it's usually just the fact that no one really gives that much of a fuck about him. His mom's a stripper, hooker, whatever. And there's episodes where you do get to see like Nelson does crave that social acceptance that he's obviously denied. So his role is he'd rather if he can't have that, he'd rather be a bully and get negative attention rather than just simply have no attention at all.
Well, if there's a secret life of him, it's what he's hiding it from is his own sensitivity.
Yeah.
Because when you do get a real glimpse of like what's underneath this facade, it's always, that the fact that he does care about things. He's not the aloof sort of character he portrays himself as. There was an episode where he was sitting at the table talking with a bunch of the nerdier kids about his love of huckleberries and how fresh huckleberries are so much better than frozen and all this other stuff. There was the episode where he kind of had a romantic interest in Lisa, and and ever since then they've kind of been depicted as hanging out occasionally. There's also he kind of has an interesting relationship with Martin, where it's kind of been implied that he actually does like Martin, even though he bullies him relentlessly. So there's definitely a softer side, and I think it's actually pretty realistic to bullies in real life, because usually they are acting out because they feel like hurt in some
Martin
other way.
Everything that Nelson is not.
Right, that's true.
I mean, that covetous nature of just like you're smart, you're maybe not popular, but you're very good at what you do. And obviously Nelson academically is not that great. He's like a Bart, he basically is like a T or a TJ, social promotions probably.
This is his perhaps father, but probably
future.
not, and almost certainly his future. This is Barney Gumble, the one I think a character that exists in The Simpsons almost to just make Homer look like he has his shit together in comparison.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one of the big tools for Barney. The
Uh,
village, he's the town drunk.
he's
You know
the
what I mean?
yeah
There
he's
had to be one.
he's the town drunk. And you know, most of the jokes around Barney tend to center around his perpetually drunken nature. You know, you can see here that he looks pretty disheveled. He doesn't look to be in great physical health. It's kind of strongly implied by certain episodes, like the fact that he's able to run a successful business in the Mr. Plow episode. And in fact, we see that he actually becomes quite a ruthless businessman. It's also kind of implied by the time that he won the best picture in the Springfield Film Festival. That there's a real intelligent thinking human being somewhere in there. And in fact, I think one of the times he was in a bar fight was over like British politics. So he has like, this is a guy
He
that
has interests that you wouldn't suspect.
right, and he has sort of like an artist. You know, he has an artistic side. He has a well-informed side. There's some intelligence in there somewhere. He has
Part of what happens when addiction rules your life. It's not that Barney is an idiot or is incompetent. It's just that his addiction is the overriding force that drives him.
Yeah, and he has a beautiful singing voice. We've seen a few times when he cleans up, like he was he was much closer than Homer was to qualifying for the astronaut program in the episode where they try to find a common everyday guy to send into space. Barney outperformed Homer in all the tests. The only thing is that he regressed back into alcoholism. So you know, this is kind of you know, and I kind of relate this to JD, the guy that you know, someone me and Scotty knew, who was a guy who was also pretty intelligent, who was allowed his life to be taken over and pretty much ruined by alcoholism.
Yep.
And you guys have probably heard about JD in the past. Old family friend. But yeah, this guy definitely reminds me a lot of that. And it definitely, you know, it's a kind of a surprisingly complex character for one that kind of initially I think seems sort of one note.
Well, that's true of all these characters. I mean, there's a lot of themes going on here, and one that I keep locking in on is public face and private face. You know what I mean? Most of the time when we see Barney Gumble, he's just a drunk fuck up, because that's how the town and the people that he knows and his neighbors and his friends in the town think of him. You know, like that's what he presents. But, you know, underneath all of that is a surprisingly capable person that just doesn't apply any of his talent. You know, his time instead of being spent you know, fostering his many talents is just at the bottom of a bottle, you know.
Right.
So there seems to be a lot of inner life in the Simpsons that we get glimpses of that humanize these characters beyond just being, you know, the fall down drunk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be one of the real strengths of how the Simpsons, at least in these early seasons, kind of approached its characters, because you know, all of these characters have some sort of very recognizable external kind of like, this is who they are. But then there's, you know, glimpses of, you know, who they truly are on a deeper level, deep down inside. Other than Ralph, who's pretty much what you see is what you get.
One of the abundant advantages of having so many seasons of The Simpsons is just that the character development is there for a lot of these characters. Like Barney does get an episode where it's like, yep, Mr. Plow, you know, things we can point to. So we can see these hints and these glimpses of that. But obviously, you know, you have to watch it over a long period of time to kind of get a sense of who that character is.
This is Principal Seymour Skinner, or Armin Tamzarian, if you prefer.
Whatever. He's Skinner.
Yeah, this is Seymour Skinner. He's the principal of Springfield Elementary, the antagonistic force that comes up against Bart Simpson. You know, he represents order. But you know, and you know, in some ways he's kind of innocent, but in other ways he's pretty cynical. You know, he has yeah, there's an episode where I think it was during the teacher's strike episode where he's arguing with Edna, and she's like, "What about these students' future?" And he's like, "You and I both know these children have no future," and
Right.
everyone's around and sees it and looks at him. He's like, he stands up and tries to salvage it by being like, "Prove me wrong, kids. Prove me wrong."
Beaten down by reality. It's like you go into this and you have like this, like in the beginning, you're optimistic, you're fresh faced, you know what, we're going to make a difference. And then you just see the same story play out over and over again. Eventually you just become cynical and go, oh my God, this is just bullshit. It doesn't matter what I do. Despite my best efforts, I'm not going to change the world. I'm not going to change the society around me at large. I'm just going to give it. And I'm just going to be the asshole. Like, Bart, don't fuck up, and that's ultimately the role he kind of tends to play. He's definitely the authority figure, but also the one that, almost kind of relation to Mo, he's almost kind of just given up. He's like, whatever, this is my job. I'm staying in my lane. And as long as it doesn't bother me too much, I don't care.
He very specifically, and I think this is another strength of The Simpsons and why it became so popular, he manages to broadly appeal to a huge viewing audience of teachers. Because this is, I worked in education primarily with principals for the last 3 or 4 years I was there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all of them were Principal Skinner, but all of them had aspects of Principal Skinner. Like, he thinks he's an authority. He's really let the power that he has over the school and the influence go to his head, even if he doesn't realize it. You know what I mean? He, despite being inept, always has an excuse. Always has someone to blame for his own failures at work. These are things that, they appear in principles. And he gives teachers a cathartic place that they can go, to kind of see their own boss reflected.
Right. I think that he's kind of portrayed as having like his heart in the right place in a lot of ways, but obviously there is sort of like this disconnect where he's out of touch. He doesn't really understand the kids that are in his care, and he doesn't always make the right decisions, because of that.
Well, you have to think about it too, from the perspective of as you grow older, the things like, obviously when you're 35, 40, I don't know how old he is canonically, but you're not really in touch with that. Most people are not in touch with that part of themselves. They're not in touch with like, hey, when I was a kid, how would I feel about this? What do I think about this? It's like you don't really have that sense of yourself anymore. And that's kind of what that disconnect is. There's this chasm, and it's evident in society. It's like the way kids perceive the world and reality around them, and versus the way like Paul said, this principal who's on a power trip. Like I'm the fucking boss of this school. I'm going to run the school I see fit.
This is the most controversial character.
Please remove this from the screen.
In all of history. Yeah, I shouldn't even really be showing this. I mean, this is pretty offensive. This is Apu Nahasapima Petalon, I believe, who runs the local convenience store, the Quickie Mart. He's kind of a... I don't know what they're doing with him at this point. I think they're either minimizing his role or recasting him or something like that.
Which is really sad because for a number of reasons, obviously, but he is not an offensive portrayal of what he's supposed to represent in this show. He's the immigrant. So he works what a lot of people consider to be a bottom of the barrel type of job. He's the guy at the Quickie Mart. But he, as an immigrant to this country, for him, that's his fucking castle, man. He's made it. And not only that, he's a remarkably ingenious survivor of a character. You know what I mean? He has a level of preparedness for bad events that, belies his simple job in the eyes of his community. So nothing about that is a negative portrayal of immigrants. In fact, I think it's a pretty fucking spot on portrayal of a lot of immigrants to this country.
It's kind of funny because this is another. I'm sorry, Scotty. This is another character who's portrayed as a hard worker, and the only other character I can think of offhand who's portrayed as a hard worker is Willie the groundskeeper, who is also an immigrant. So both of the immigrants on this show. The two characters who are, immigrants seem to be portrayed as being much harder working than their American counterparts. Which
and especially in the case of Apu, much more thankful of what they have, you know, where he may be perceived as a low level guy. He doesn't look at himself that way. Like, he takes what he does very seriously, and he's appreciative of the life that it affords him. You know what I mean? In a way that a lot of the other characters in town with all these ambitions and shit, they don't connect with.
Well, I mean, people look down on these jobs and roles in society, but the reality is that he's actually a business owner and is actually pretty fucking successful. Like, running, like, there's a reason there's so many convenience stores exist in America, and it's actually true that immigrants tend to be. If you look at recent immigrants to the United States, a lot of them tend to be business owners. They're very ambitious, and that's really true to reality here. And that's why I also agree with Paul's assessment. Like, it's kind of saying this character is offensive. It's like, this character is actually the reality. Not just simply because of his national origin, but just because of the fact that he's hardworking, industrious, and a business owner, and taking his own initiative. While these other people who are more established in that community are kind of like, I have a low-level job. I just do some menial shit. Like, oh, look at Homer. I mean, he's always at the Quickie Mart, but he's a fucking low-level safety inspector.
Let us never speak of this horrible, offensive character again. This is Otto. Otto Man is his full name. Not really as far as I can tell anyway, not really a whole lot to this character. Kind of just a really kind of an outdated stereotype of a like metalhead sort of drug addict kind of,
I mean, it's not as outdated as you might think. This guy may not be into metal now, but he's kind of like the pre-boomer.
Yeah.
The guy that's completely out of touch with what the kids think are cool, but still thinks of himself as being in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, in the initial seasons of The Simpsons, he was kind of portrayed as like a confidant for Bart, an adult that the kids actually would talk to on their own level. He's the bus driver. Most of the jokes in like the later seasons, at least when I say the later seasons, I mean the later seasons that I actually have watched, like through basically through season 12. So not the actual later seasons because I haven't been watching, but he kind of just became more of like a punchline of whenever there's like a drug reference, Otto kind of shows up to be involved in that in some way. If there was a episode where there was some kind of like pretentious yuppie store called like Stoner's Pot Palace, and he walks out of it disappointed. He's like, "This is blatant false advertising," He's like the counterculture guy. Yeah.
Which, as he's portrayed as kind of an old trope, but that guy still exists. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But in this form, without any sort of update, he kind of does.
He's dated.
He's a little bit dated as a character, I feel like, but whatever. Still fun. I mean, there's some good jokes with him, but I don't really know if there's really much below the surface on this one. But maybe there is. I don't know.
He's not a very judgmental character. I mean, and the earlier Simpsons episode really portray that. He's kind of, I would say, a good listener. I mean, like, he's always listening to music, but he's not a threatening character. That's why he does make that connection with Bart. And I think, the show kind of lost sight of that as it went on. It kind of lost sight of that, not every character has to be this boisterous, over the top, oh, I'm this, and, sometimes it's good to have characters that are more empathetic and more just down to earth.
What about our good friend here? Milhouse Van Houten. This is kind of Bart's flunky. Lisa's admirer. Basically, he sort of a submissive character to the Simpsons kids. Bart's cool enough to push Milhouse around, but nice enough to him to keep him around. Lisa, of course, is the object of his unrequited affections,
which is problematic, by the way.
He's really like,
means no.
If you really truly want to look at Milhouse and analyze him, he's really like the 50s kind of American kid, because like he's the kid that's being raised kind of like, you're going to be an adult. You're just raised as an adult. And that you clearly see that if you look at his decision making, it's like very like, well, what would the authorities, what would my parents want me to do? He's very timid. He's very afraid of his environment and the world around him. And like, that was kind of something that happened in American culture. And I mean, and Matt Groening is a product of that time period. So it's kind of, I think he almost probably sees a little bit of himself in that character and the way that kids were raised during those time periods.
Yeah, and another thing is, I think that to kind of build on what Paul was saying a minute ago about that, the problematic nature of Milhouse's unrequited attraction to Lisa is, I think it's kind of been implied that Lisa kind of strings him along because she likes knowing that no matter what happens, she could always like break glass in case of, unable to find anyone else to, basically he's like waiting in the wings as like this backup.
See, I always thought that in Lisa, it went even a little further than that. I think she likes him.
Yeah.
Like, I think she's a little girl, so it's not an adult relationship, but I think that there's a part of Lisa that likes him. And there was a really kind of like offensive, at least to this character, moment in that Gaga episode that you made us watch for the non-patrons episode we recorded.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember who said it, but there was just a point where Lisa was, talking about or having flash before her eyes possible futures. And one of those horrible futures was married to Milhouse.
Right.
Which, as adults, when this whole pretense of social order that causes Milhouse to be this kind of nerd kind of fades away with time, they'd probably be good together. They have a lot in common. They're smart. They're, overachievers. They're, I don't really see a life with Milhouse in the future as a sweetheart is a horrible way for Lisa's life to end up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there was another shot kind of taken. I remember there was an episode where Lisa saw her own future, and she saw her own wedding, and she was like, she's talking about I guess it's kind of an outmoded idea that the white of the bride is supposed to symbolize virginity, but she was like, I don't know if I should wear white. I mean, what about Milhouse? And Marge looks at her. She's like, Milhouse doesn't count, And then they both kind of laugh at Milhouse's expense. So, I mean, he's kind of the character's kind of treated as a punching bag a lot of the time. Like the show itself seems to kind of revel in being a little bit mean to Milhouse.
Well, it's obvious to see why. I mean, just based solely on his outward appearance and the way he handles a lot of things, like he's very neurotic and kind of paranoid. And like overreacts, in a very bombastic way to things that maybe necessarily don't necessitate that kind of reaction.
He's got helicopter parents. You know what I mean? He's the kid that has parents that are just hovering in the background of everything he does, kind of instilling all of their paranoia and fear into him as a parenting exercise.
At this point, are you guys starting to be like, how many fucking characters are there in The Simpsons?
Oh, not at all.
Because there's a lot. This is Edna Krabappel, whose character was retired when the voice actress died in like 2013. Yeah, that's right. And she was Bart's teacher, kind of played around with the trope of the teacher who doesn't really, I mean, it's not like she's gone to the point where she totally doesn't give a shit anymore, but she's definitely been beaten down. She still tries to do her job most of the time, but a lot of times you could tell it's just like she's lost that fire and that like, I'm gonna fucking really make a difference in a child's life kind of thing. Like that's kind of, she's past that. She's like, look, I think at one point she kind of states her credo is like, if I can teach one child one thing, then the day's been a success.
Well, I mean, that's a common sentiment amongst teachers.
Right. I mean,
once again,
she strikes me as a very authentic. I mean, like I definitely had teachers that remind me of this, teacher.
Well, she had to fucking deal with Bart for 20 plus seasons. So in her defense,
that is true. She never gets to cycle out her classes. She's always got the same fucking little shit eaters in her class.
And then, another thing is that she's desperately hungry for, male companionship.
Sure.
She's looking for love. She's been pretty unsuccessful in finding it. I think by the time her character was retired, I think she was actually dating Ned Flanders.
Aren't her and Principal Seymour an on again, off again thing too?
They were on again, off again, and then finally they broke it off, and then I guess she got with Ned, but that was way past when I stopped watching. I just kind of read about that.
So Ned Flanders gets divorced, or his wife dies, or something.
Ned's wife died, I think, in season like 12ish.
Big deal. I remember that. His wife ends up like, did she fall out a window or something, or was some crazy?
No, they're at a sporting event, and there's someone with a T-shirt gun. Homer incites the person with the T-shirt gun to fire a T-shirt at him, and then he bends down to pick something up right as the gun is fired, and then the T-shirt hits Maude, and then she goes flying off of the edge of the bleachers and plummets to her death.
She did fall to her death, but it was different circumstances.
And I think that was around somewhere in the 10-ish region.
That's how I knew The Simpsons was still relevant then, because I don't think I was watching then, or maybe I was, but like I remember that being a big deal.
It was like a major gimmick at the time. They were like, one of these classic Simpsons characters will die. And
it's Maude.
It was like a ratings attempt to fucking probably get people to tune in. But yeah, Edna's she definitely is like a lot of these characters. I mean, you can kind of see either yourself or people you know in her. And I definitely had teachers that kind of reminded me of Edna. This is Troy McClure, voiced by Phil Hartman, who was, he was awesome, and he was really great in his two major roles on The Simpsons. We'll get to his other character in a little bit. Troy McClure was great. Every time he was one of the only characters that I think, he was a character in The Simpsons that almost, I think maybe only once or twice actually interacted with The Simpsons.
Right.
But you mostly saw him like every time they were, had to watch like an educational film or something like that. It was always Troy McClure. And he was, hi, I'm Troy McClure. You might remember me from such films as blah, 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 blah. And, that with that Phil Hartman delivery, it worked super well. Probably would still be, there's a good chance he would still be a character on The Simpsons, if not for, the fact that Phil Hartman was murdered by his... allegedly murdered. Yeah, he was murdered by his wife in a murder-suicide, I believe.
Yep, in 1998.
Yeah, didn't he get he was laying in bed and he got shot? Is that how it happened?
Yep.
Asleep and was shot in his head.
Yeah. He was laying in bed asleep and he was shot by his wife. So terrible end to his life, but amazing contribution to these Simpsons characters. Troy McClure, you don't really get too much of a deeper look into Troy until the episode where he gets a sham marriage to, I don't remember if it was Patty or Selma, but it was one of them. And it's strongly implied that he has a sexual attraction to fish. And,
Okay.
Yeah, we all got our things.
Yeah, I guess he has sex with fish. That's his thing.
A pesca-sexual.
Yeah. And, in order to, I guess rumors have gotten out that he fucks fish. So he marries, I think it was Selma. It might have been Patty. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong. I'm just going to say Selma and plow forward with that. So he marries Selma to, quiet the rumors down and to, let it be known that he likes women, not fish. But that's about all you really get to know him. He's your typical... Hollywood kind of sleazeball sort of
B-lister, basically.
Yeah, he's a B-list actor with a giant ego.
Paycheck, I'm there.
Yeah, he's got a giant ego. He thinks very highly of himself. He thinks pretty much only of himself. But super.
Even this picture you're showing, it's almost like he's trying to look at himself. You know what I mean?
Right. But super fun character every time he's on screen for sure. He's just the right kind of slimy that you kind of want to see what he's going to get into. This next character is sort of your stereotypical mafioso, kind of just a composite of various gangster movie tropes. This is
Tony Soprano of The Simpsons.
And in fact, his name is Tony. This is Fat Tony.
Tony, TJ.
Who, who is every time there's a need for a mobster in a Simpsons storyline, he was used. I guess his character has been killed in some of the later seasons, but At the time
Because
I
it's
watched,
offensive to Italians.
I guess. At the time I watched, he was a constant character. Not really much going on beyond just the Italian stereotype thing.
It's mobster.
I think they kind of implied that maybe he had somewhat of a soft side, but you can't really make him too soft because he's murdering people and stuff. So,
and like yet again, like brilliant design here. Like you have kind of this one eye that's slanting in, and you have this wide eye, kind of like just looking around for danger or trouble or whatever it is he's out for.
Yep, and he kind of has an askew to his face, so he almost kind of views the world in a crooked way. This character was always super fun, but I don't really, I don't like. Maybe I haven't hung around enough Italian mobsters to know how authentic he is. I think this one is more based on movie stereotypes than.
But there's some genesis. I mean, like the genesis of that is kind of like the bigger, like a lot of Italians do get fat. They eat a lot of fucking food, and a lot of it's really good. So I mean, this is not necessarily out of the realm of what you would see with a mobster.
Yep. This is the family doctor, probably the most respected doctor in Springfield, though not the only doctor in Springfield. Dr. Hibbert, who he's kind of a fun character in that. Like you see here, he's got this smile on his face, but it's obviously fake. You know, and I think there's I think that this character kind of plays on like the inherent distrust a lot of people have towards doctors. You can see that he's got a hand behind his back there, like what's he hiding in there? Big needle or some shit. He's got the sucker in the front facing hand, like, ooh, look, a nice sucker. Then what's behind your back? And he's got this smile, but his eyes aren't smiling,
Right.
The jovial kind of like laughs at his own jokes. Kind of, and there's people like that. It's like, he's kind of making those bad dad jokes. Going, well, now you have to get this, or here's some really bad news, or we can't even help you.
Yeah, he chuckles like a moron constantly. A lot of times he'll chuckle at things that are, not funny. Like he'll tell you bad news and then chuckle. He's kind of I think he plays on a lot of those fears about doctors. He's not really portrayed as being like an incompetent doctor, but
I always kind of thought he'd given up. Like he knows what's best for these people, but he also knows they're not going to take his advice. So he just kind of bluntly gives it to them, knowing, having given up long ago that anybody's going to take his medical recommendations seriously.
Right. And then there's the true greatest doctor in Springfield, Dr. Nick Riviera, who, as his ad will let you know, is as good as Dr. Hibbert. Dr. Nick Riviera is kind of he has his big catchphrase every time he enters a scene. He's like, "Hi, everybody," and everyone says, "Hi, Dr. Nick," and he's basically the outright incompetent doctor. He's like
the shady doctor.
Yeah, he's like your shady bargain basement doctor. The smile on his face looks a lot more genuine, but like I don't.
Money he's gonna make. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's never really portrayed as like evil, I guess, but just like he does evil things and he's pretty shady, and he's willing to do medically unethical surgeries on people, but he's always does it with such a cheerful demeanor. Like, he's unflappable in his sort of like enthusiastic happiness.
And honestly, true to reality, I mean, there are a lot of doctors that play this role in society where it's like, or even, Dr. Nick is strongly implied to not even truly be a doctor, or like at best, like a doctor of like, maybe you went to some Bahamian medical school or some bullshit.
There have been scenes where it's actually showed Dr. Nick helping Dr. Hibbert with like surgeries and stuff. So I guess that he is maybe a real doctor, or I don't know. It's kind of
makes way through it.
It's kind of vague. But he does. He at one point he does heart surgery on Homer because Homer can't afford a real doctor to do heart surgery, and he basically watches a tape on how to do it the night before. So he's grossly incompetent at his job, but doesn't really seem to understand the implication. Like, he doesn't take very seriously at all the amount of trust that you're supposed to have in, a doctor, someone that you're like, obviously putting your life in their hands, and he'll accept that responsibility without ever actually taking stock of it or understanding it in any real way. This is definitely the doctor in Springfield you'd probably go to if you were like just wanted an opiate prescription or whatever. Move on here. This is just your kind of stereotypical science character. If there's any need for like a wacky machine or something, or some kind of out there plot device, they're gonna bring out Professor Frink here, who is basically just Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
And there's really not much more.
He's the nutty professor.
Yeah, he's just he does the Jerry Lewis voice, and he's real smart and he has inventions. This is my favorite character.
Of course you would say that, TJ.
This is Comic Book Guy. Do you guys know Comic Book Guy's real name?
No,
You do not.
Jeffrey Albertson.
he's a Jeffrey Albertson for sure.
Yeah, he definitely looks like a Jeffrey fucking Albertson. This is I love this character. I did a bunch, like I said a little bit earlier in the episode. I've done some "Who Are You" kind of quizzes, and pretty much all of them said I was Comic Book Guy. So, and I pretty much already knew that. This is a morbidly obese, insanely sarcastic complainer who's really cares a little bit too much about entertainment, and
Really make an episode about entertainment.
talks about it constantly. Complains about all of his favorite shows going downhill, or why this movie was bad, or this comic was stupid. Just terminal,
He's got just like an encyclopedic knowledge of all the
Yes.
nerdy things he's into. He's
Yeah.
the guy that never loses an argument about Star Wars.
Right. And he's constantly on message boards arguing. Then he and then he runs his comic shop where he gets to treat customers like total shit, which he loves because, obviously in most aspects of his life, he's probably feels pretty powerless, but in that zone, he feels like he's a powerful fucking person who can dispense insults to people and look down his nose at anybody who's, asked what he thinks is a stupid question. This character, though, despite a lot of these negative personality traits, is portrayed as an extremely intelligent character. He is in the he's one of the characters that's just portrayed as belonging to Springfield's chapter of Mensa. And like Paul said, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the things that he's interested in. And despite his negative outlook, obviously he does have a profound love for the arts and entertainments that he does, look at and relish.
There's some great self-deprecating jokes that he makes at his own expense.
Yeah.
So I mean, I wouldn't say it's all just like, oh, he's just always sarcastic. He definitely has moments where he's more reflective of like, yeah, look at my station in life, look what I've done. Like, I'm obese, I run a comic book shop. So there's glimpses of that in the character too, I would say.
On at least one occasion, and I think maybe it was, I don't know if it was something they were like hinting at or what, but I mean, there was one episode at least where he was shown kind of hanging out with Marge Simpson and just gossiping with her about town, matters. Marge has been variously portrayed as a gossip in the town, and I guess Comic Book Guy is someone that she gossips with, so that's kind of a unexpected side to his personality, I guess. I fucking love Comic Book Guy, but mostly because he's me, and I love myself. This next character is the other Phil Hartman character that unfortunately was retired after Phil was killed. This is attorney Lionel Hutz, who was the Simpsons family attorney in a lot of the earlier seasons, who is much like Dr. Nick, completely incompetent at his job and shown to be, massively shady. I think canonically does not have a law degree. Tries.
I thought he went to night law school or something.
Right, and he tries every shady, underhanded trick he can to win whatever case he's doing. One of the things we know about him is that he filed a lawsuit against the Neverending Story, because of course it ended. you know, for wrongful, like, false advertising.
Frivolous lawsuit. Yeah. Just your typical scumbag lawyer character. But I mean, like, his performance.
What's that, Paul?
Ambulance chaser type.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
total ambulance chasing lawyer. But once again, kind of played with this sort of like relentless enthusiasm for what he's doing. Where, you know, he's not, there's no sort of conflict to him, but there's also not really like a maliciousness to it either. It's almost like the same way they portray him and Dr. Nick are portrayed very similarly in that they don't seem to have maliciousness toward, you know, in their actions. They're just kind of like mindlessly, selfishly sort of evil characters.
Right.
Without being like overtly like, haha, I'm going to fucking do all this bad stuff. It's just like they don't care.
They're like the neutral characters. Like whatever comes to them.
They're like
if it's
chaotic
in your
neutral,
hands, they're gonna do.
basically. And, you know, you've seen him, you know, burning, you know, documents in dumpsters and, you know, all. I think he accepts a babysitting job for The Simpsons for like, you know, $4 or some ridiculous like low amount or some shit.
With that episode where Marge was trying to sell real estate, and wasn't he the boss?
Yeah, he worked at the real estate thing. It was where he gave her the lecture about, you know, she's like, I got to tell people the truth. He's like, yeah, of course, but there's the truth. And then he like kind of shakes his head no, and then the truth. You know,
Just a great character, dude. It's a great. I mean, and just use the right amount. When he was there, he was just used so well.
Mm-hmm. This is Snake. Just your typical, basically, whenever you need a criminal character that isn't, you know, like connected to organized crime, they kind of rely on Snake. He's often depicted as being in jail. He's often depicted as, you know, stealing, you know, TV sets out of a warehouse, or, you know, robbing the Quickie Mart, or doing a home invasion. Basically, whenever the show has the need for sort of like a generic criminal character, it's usually Snake that they use.
Yeah. He's the low level criminal.
Yeah, the petty criminal. Of course, he drives a muscle car too.
Yeah, and you know, there was a pretty good Treehouse of Horror that involves him being executed for his crimes, and his hair is donated to Homer, and then it takes over Homer's body, and Homer starts, you know, resuming Snake's crime spree and getting revenge on all the people who put him away and stuff. But not a very multifaceted character. We're kind of getting into characters that are a little bit more on the superficial scale of things at this point. This is Mayor Quimby. Kind of talks in a very like John F. Kennedy sort of you know, manner. Has a lot of the affectations, but he's like your typical corrupt politician. Just totally blatantly like dirty Democrat politician.
Yeah, womanizer, constantly seen with all these, you know, various like, you know, fucking little mistresses and liaisons and all that. I mean, just you're like your typical, like, obviously totally model, like you said, totally model off the Kennedy sort of dynasty, where it's just like just, you know, totally corrupt, totally fucking willing to do whatever it takes to maintain power. And there's a few episodes where his power is threatened, and of course then he, you know, briefly becomes responsive, and of course as soon as that threat is over with, just goes back to business as usual.
Yeah, he's portrayed as not even really spending much time in Springfield, like a lot of mayors. He spends a lot of time doing, you know, research and stuff in like the Bahamas and things.
Of course.
This is Kent Brockman, who I don't really know why, but for some reason he always struck me as one of the scummier characters on the show, even though he's very rarely like overtly portrayed that way. You get kind of little hints of it. You know, kind of like when he thinks the Earth has been invaded by killer ant beings. You know, he's like, I for one welcome our ant overlords. Just like instantly like turncoat against humanity kind of dude.
Right.
And you know, he's got, you know, he's your like typical fucking salacious fucking headline, you know, looking for the next fucking headline journalist kind of anchor personality, like on the local level that obviously thinks of himself more highly than anyone else does. Has that authoritative newscaster voice. But we don't really. This is another character, like where we're getting to kind of the characters that are a little bit more peripheral, where you don't really see as much into their lives as you do some of these other characters we covered a little bit earlier on.
I think there's a few episodes that feature him prominently, but he's not a major character.
Yeah, and I don't know, he always kind of gives me a weird vibe.
Yeah, I mean, he's just supposed to represent all of the media.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Where he's kind of respected by everybody because they get their news from him, but he has no real concern for the truth. He has no journalistic integrity. He has no concept of that. He's just, he's self-serving in that he wants to say whatever is going to sell the most ad space. So he's completely abusive of his position of pretty large power.
This is Martin Prince, who's
the tattletale kid.
Yeah, he's the smart kid. He's the tattletale. He's the teacher's pet. He's probably the rival for. They've never really played. I don't think they've ever actually played up a rivalry between him and Lisa, but they're kind of the two students at Springfield Elementary that actually maybe have some sort of academic future. He's kind of a feat. It's sort of implied that he's a little bit on the girly side as well. He's very sensitive, very much like wants to obey the rules and do the not necessarily the right thing, but just be obedient.
Right. So he wants to follow his directives from the people he's trying to suck up to.
Yeah, he's kind of a little suck up. Lisa, with Lisa, she has like her own like well-defined sort of moral compass. Like she wants to please her teachers and stuff like that. With Martin, I don't know that he has that as much as he just wants to be obedient and a people pleaser, but not really a people pleaser, but like an authority pleaser, a
collaborator.
But definitely has definitely smart, definitely sensitive, has some positive attributes. But if you put this kid in like Nazi Germany, he's going to be doing the fucking goose step, because that's the kind of person he is. This is Lenny. Lenny, who's usually paired with his buddy Carl. It's actually Lenny Leonard and Carl Carlson. These are just kind of Homer's generic friends from work who also occasionally you'll see in Moe's Tavern drinking. Not a lot to them, just kind of, kind of like
your buddies. You're kind of the guys you hang out. Hey man, what's going on? They don't have a very deep relationship. Like it's deep enough where they feel like they have a good sense of one another, but they're not intimately involved in their lives beyond peripherally hanging out at a bar or something.
Yeah,
like
and
the dude that's your friend because you see him at work every day.
Right.
Yeah.
And Carl is kind of lives in squalor canonically. He lives in a miserable sort of ramshackle apartment, and I think at some point when he's seen there, he tells I forget who sees him. I don't know if it's Homer or Marge or somebody like that, and he's like, "Please don't tell people how I live." Or was that Lenny? It was actually Lenny that I'm thinking of for that. That was Lenny who lives like that. Carl, I honestly don't know anything about Carl beyond he's black and he's Homer's work friend.
Yeah, pretty much.
We already covered Edna. Hans Moleman's kind of a fun side character who, you see him get into like weird little predicaments. He kind of has a little bit of a Kenny thing going on in that he's been portrayed as dying a few different times on The Simpsons, but he never seems to stay canonically dead.
Right. He's the true old man stereotype. Abe gets his moments of lucidity and his moments of profundity. Hans Moleman, he's basically gone. You know what I mean? Like there's really nothing left of young Hans Moleman anymore. He's just perpetually confused, perpetually in a haze of forgetfulness, always bumbling into things and not really understanding what's going on as a result. He's definitely the Joe Biden of the Simpsons.
Yeah. Another old character I didn't pull, but is kind of fun too, is Jasper, the kind of the bearded old man.
Oh yeah.
He's kind of a little bit more kooky than these other two.
The stern old man, like he's out there, but it's like he's also very authoritarian.
Yeah, his Jasper's 2 moments of fame were probably the Padlin episode, where he's like, talking. He's brought in as a substitute teacher, and he keeps telling the kids like, looking out the window, that's a paddling. Just like a whole litany of things that are a paddling. There was also the time that he froze himself in the Quickie Mart refrigeration unit to cryogenically preserve himself so that he could see the future. And he leaves a note that says, please change my pants as the style dictates, So kind of a little bit more of a kooky old man, but I didn't pull his picture. So the last characters I want to talk about, not even really Simpsons characters. I mean, I guess they are, but they don't live in Springfield. They're fictional characters within the realm of the Simpsons. But I felt like I'd be remiss not to mention Itchy and Scratchy, who I love the fucking Itchy and Scratchy shorts in here because
They fight. Itchy, dude, I love fucking Itchy and Scratchy. Every time I see them, I just think of that theme song.
Yeah, and you know what's great about Itchy and Scratchy is that it follows the model of so many classic like cartoons that we remember from when we were kids, but it kind of like
takes to the next level,
right? By like actually showing all the gore and stuff, and like having these characters have like blood and guts and innards. It kind of highlights just how violent those old cartoons really were, because they always try to kind of bypass that stuff by taking all the really visceral like violence out of it and making it something that's more nerfed a little bit.
Yeah, if a rock falls on your head, you get a giant fucking.
Like a big old lump forms.
Yeah. So it's more tongue in cheek with the approach as well.
If they'll do that same setup in Itchy and Scratchy, but when the rock falls on I don't know which is which. When it falls on the cat's head, I think he's Itchy. When the rock falls on Itchy's head, his head just explodes into fucking massive quantities of gore.
I think that Itchy and Scratchy are kind of supposed to be representative of the hyperbolic portrayal of violence in kids' cartoons that was really prevalent at the time that this show came out.
Right, there was a lot of moral grandstanding about it. Yeah.
Of like, oh, kids are just watching beat 'em ups and shoot 'em ups, and this violence is, and parents would really treat cartoons that portrayed violence in a very cartoonish way, like there was blood and guts and gore and all this nonsense.
So you think Itchy and Scratchy was like just an attempt to like actually deliver on these moral grandstanding parents' fevered imaginations?
Yeah.
So those are the characters I have pulled. Probably the characters that I relate to the most are Krusty and Comic Book Guy.
Sure.
I feel like those are the two that I see most of myself in. I think I mentioned earlier that I think there's a little bit of Homer Simpson in every, at least man, on Earth.
I have to agree with that.
I think at the core of every, at least every American man, there's a Homer Simpson. Like,
Sure.
I feel like somewhere deep down inside, or maybe not so deep for some of us, there's the person who just wants to be fat and lazy and effort and not put any effort into anything at any time, and just eat food and drink beer and or whatever, maybe the drug of choice is different.
Skate by, get thrown into impossible projects because you don't really have much acumen in what you do. It's like when every time Homer has to build something, that's like an ongoing joke. It's like, Homer, please put together the barbecue or something. And it's like Homer just goes off the rails, can't figure anything out. Homer fixed the leak. The basement's then flooded with water.
So how about you guys? Are there any characters you see aspects of yourself in?
I mean, if I get deep enough, I could see a little mirror up to my own face in pretty much all of these characters. I mean, I think that's what makes them so relatable.
Right, but I mean, do you feel like there's any that stand out as being more like this is kind of like Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I see, if I'm honest about myself, I see quite a bit of Millhouse in me. I see a little bit of not Martin, but the other Ralph. I see a little bit of Ralph going on in me. Those are really the characters that I would say probably are closest to me.
I think you got a little Mo in you too, Paul.
Yeah, Mo for sure.
How about you, Scotty?
I definitely. I mean, I don't know if there's any characters that jump out to me as like, oh, I feel like that one's is like the Scotty character, but the ones I have an affinity for, I can tell you, I love the Mr. Burns character. I definitely like Otto. I kind of like that kind of like, who gives a shit kind of mentality. I definitely like, I definitely have moments where I feel like comic book guy with certain things. I definitely have that impulse to be like, no, that's actually wrong. And here's why, like I definitely do that to people a lot that, well, actually, I definitely see myself falling victim to that. So those are probably the ones I'd say identify with most closely.
Well, we've been talking for quite a minute here, but I did want to just ask you guys real quick to kind of close out this discussion. Like, what do you think this show, like in its early years, did so right to generate? And I mean, we didn't even go over all the characters. No. There's other ones we didn't even fucking cover. But like, what do you think this show just did so right to bring all these characters to life that are so kind of relatable and iconic?
It was, I mean, we just talked about it. It was capable of humanizing stereotypes and allowing you to see a little bit of yourself and the people that are around you in it. It was like a big open invitation to paint your life into this sitcom and to see a little, your dad reflected in it, or your mom, or your best friend, or the teacher at your school. And they were really good at keeping those characters funny, but relatable enough that they applied to a broad swath of American human experience.
And apparently international too, because The Simpsons has
has
quite an international following as well.
Diversity you have with this ecosystem of characters, it's almost unparalleled and unmatched. I mean, to really, when you look at the scale, if you look at it like, here's every Simpsons character, that's a huge image. And obviously not all those characters are commonly used in the show, but to have that kind of depth that you can draw from and just such a solid cast, especially in those early seasons, it just works because you have that. Like, yep, you need the criminal character. Here you go. And you can drop that character in, you can have that storyline, and it works. A lot of shows, like, you'd have to establish, oh, here's a new character we have to establish now. Or this is some throwaway character you're never going to see again.
Yeah, The Simpsons never has to do that, or at least doesn't have to do it very often, because they have pretty much a contingency for every fucking type of person.
And really, that's one of the brilliant aspects of the show.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next time with more Deep Fat